So we're in the curriculum overview, and we're talking about introductions. And I have an introduction to the curriculum overview. And the reason for the introduction is to help you understand what the curriculum is about. And the whole hope of the introduction is to get you thinking along the same pathways, along the same lines that I'm thinking. Because I know that Jane is thinking about a bunion you have on your foot. I don't know. She's not. I'm just saying she could be thinking about 100 different things, but I want her to be thinking about what I'm thinking about. Does that make sense? And for me to get her to think about what I want her to think about, what I want you to think about, you kind of need to draw that in. And that same thing applies to kids. And it takes time. I want you to see this. If you've already, I can't remember if I've used this before, if I haven't, but it's worth watching again. I just watched it again the other day, and I was like, I've got to use this. So I want you to check it out.
We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you?
Okay, so they have a whole group of people. They brought one person in. They've rung it 3 times now. 3 times. Boop. Everybody else stands up. She didn't. 1, 2. See what happens on the 3rd time.
After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do?
She didn't do it.
No peer pressure.
What do you think?
She didn't do it.
What do you think she's going to do? How many think she stands up? How many people think everybody else is gone, she's not going to?
I think she's not gonna.
She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there.
Actually, it gets funnier than that because the next person that comes in, not part of the group, a stranger that walks in, she convinces him to stand up. And then there gets to be a larger group, and there's this one guy, he's pretty not, he's a pretty bombastic kind of guy, and you can see he's having a hard time with this. And it's been a while since that first group left, and they're still doing it over and over. Here's the deal. We have this woman. She had a situation she was in. Other people were doing one thing. She was convinced. Nobody told her. Nobody tried to argue this is an important thing to do for your cardiovascular system, to stand up and down, sit down. It's not anything like that. Just the peers around her doing it convinced her. And then to the point that she was willing to do it of her own accord, of her own volition, just herself. This woman here, I want you to identify and picture with these kids that are sitting in classrooms each and every day. There are peer groups that they want to be part of, that they are seeking. It's not just strangers either. These are peer groups, people that are exerting real pressure. If this woman with a bunch of strangers can't resist that kind of peer pressure to just follow along, does that make sense? Now, we have in our curriculum, there is a guy by the name of Daniel. He went from his place where he was at to a whole different country in exile. He had a small group of friends, apparently. But everybody else was doing one thing. He was in a hostile environment. There was peer pressure. Just go along. That was the rule. Go along. If you go along, you don't just have more friends. If you go along, you get to keep your life. Huge peer pressure. It's called social contagion. This is something that spreads. You get an idea that gets put into a group of people. One person gets convinced, or more people can get convinced, and it spreads. Social media is going to be one part of this piece of these things that kids are hearing and seeing. There are norms that are expected of them, ideas that they are accepting without knowing that they are accepting it, to the point that they go ahead and defend those ideas, even though they have no reason for having or holding those ideas. I saw it there, therefore it's right. Guys, we have a big job to do. And then it's a little worse here than this lady, because this is a group of peers, people she didn't know, had no peer influence. Not only is there peer influence, but what if you had someone in the office, the receptionist, say, you must stand and sit in order to have your appointment? Well, you have an authority figure in these kids' lives. Some of them are teaching neutral stuff. Some of them are not. Some of them are teaching ideology that completely opposes Scripture. This is what our curriculum covers. A young man, taken from his homeland. And that's going to be our first lesson here. We want to look at lessons not only vertically. Obviously, the vertically means everything in that club is one thing, but it's also horizontally. We want to look at how the pieces fit together for the whole unit. Lesson 1 here, we have a guy named Daniel, and then we have other names. They get renamed. They are taken to a different place. There are different norms. And the big question is, at 15 or 16 years old, will these young people do what is right? That's huge, guys. I don't think we can even get ourselves in the mindset of how much pressure that would have been exerted on these young people. And then for these, there's a reason why Daniel's in the Bible, right? There's a reason why God chose this man to receive that inspiration, to receive this scripture. It's because this man was a man who was following God, not in a place that was easy to do, but in one of the most hostile places that you're going to have, that you can imagine. 15 or 16 years old, they go, there is a new rule set. They could just go along, and probably so many people did. These kids, when they are in the classroom, there is a different rule set. They are being drawn in by other kids and by the authority figures in the classroom. You should do this. They stand up. They don't do it. They are. They do it respectfully. It's not like they go around saying, "We're not going to do this," and they ask permission. They talk to them. They reason. Man, if my kids at 15 or 16 could do what Daniel and his friends did, wouldn't that be awesome? And that really is what we get to share with these kids. So the main challenge here is, will the children at your Good News Club honor God? And really, what they had to do, Daniel and his friends, they had to make the hard choice. That was hard to do. They had to make an independent choice to honor God. That is what this first lesson is about. And it's a big thing for these kids to, I want you to see, it's not a small thing. It's a big thing that they have to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I really like this lesson series, guys.
I love it.
This is amazing. Okay, so I don't have time to tell you all the things in your notes, but I really think it's really important in this one to explain what the word honor means, because I think kids in this culture probably, it's not a word they hear a lot. So honor means, as a verb, to regard someone with great respect and adherence to what is right. To regard someone with great respect and adherence to what is right. And so to think about where like Daniel is in that hostile of a situation, imagine the respect and the honor he must have had for God to honor God in this way in the midst of this culture. So I would explain that to children. So we got a Bible lesson intro. This is an exciting one. So who to listen to? It's kind of listed in your notes, but you're gonna have a volunteer come up and you're gonna blindfold them. So Micah, you come up here. Let's say I choose Micah. It's like, okay, Micah, I'm gonna blindfold you, so I blindfold Micah, and then you want to list out like a kind of a course beforehand. It's gonna be real easy for him. It's okay. But then your job as a teacher is to give Micah, or whoever you choose, the correct instructions to get from point A to wherever point B is. Now, don't make it too hard. The rest of the audience, the kids, is going to shout out as many wrong instructions and as many wrong things as possible. And the goal is for Micah to listen to you and to get from point A. And so you just see how far you can get. But the point is, thank you, Micah. You bet.
Pro tip: you might use one of the staff or one of your teachers to do that.
Yeah,
to be blindfolded.
To be blindfolded, because then you have less factors. But so the point is you guys are kind of the peer pressure, right? And the goal is to listen to honor God rather than what everyone else is saying. So that's kind of the idea there. We got an object lesson. So in this lesson, Daniel chooses to keep his life pure, to keep it clean. I love it when it says Daniel resolved, right? He decided that he was going to keep his life clean. So kind of to illustrate that, and you don't have to do this object lesson, you can come up with your own. This is just an idea. So you have this white cloth, this pure white, pure cloth, and you're like, look at this, guys, look at this, this is awesome. How many of you think we should keep this nice and clean? Everyone wants to keep it clean, right? But then it's like a game. So you choose a volunteer. So I need a volunteer. How about Micah again?
You're great.
Okay, so then you have cards, you have clean and you have dirty. And so you put them behind your back, and now it's up to Micah. He's going to choose a hand. Whichever hand he chooses is what happens to the rack. So choose an arm. Left arm. Oh, you have to draw. So then he takes a Sharpie and he draws like a triangle on the clean, white, pure. Thank you, Mike. You can see that. So the idea is kind of like a game, and it's also fun because the goal is to keep it clean. So they don't want to choose draw, because then they have to draw something like a picture on the thing. Then it becomes dirty. So all that to say, the illustration is the choices you make in your life. Those choices dictate whether you're keeping your life pure or clean. Daniel resolved. I love that word, resolved. He chose. He said, no, I'm going to keep my life clean. And he did. And he did it. So that might be an object lesson you could use to illustrate.
All right.
They're over there.
For this small group, we're talking about choices, that your choices matter, and so there's a little, kind of a cheesy little game to play with your small group about would you choose this or would you choose that. But then the goal is to say, every day you make choices, and are you choosing to honor God? And one of the ways you can honor God is by spending time with God. And so if you haven't yet given kids the Wonder Books, this would be a great small group to do that. So all throughout Daniel's life, right, we get to prayer at the end, right, his relationship with God is very strong because of his intimacy that he had with God. And so every week then you can kind of pull out the need to spend time with God using the devotional books. We gave these to you at the beginning of the year in your tubs if you need more, because your club has grown since then. We have some here for you can take, but that would be included with the first small group. And I always tell the kids, if you do 4 or 6 pages in 1 week, I explain to them every day you're seeking to spend time with God, then you get a prize if they come back with their book, and then you can look through their book with them during that small group time or during the DAB time after the Bible story too.
Very cool.
We've also got a verse intro, which is arm wrestling, so kind of an interactive one. I saw this done at a Good News Club, and I was like, that is probably one of the best introductions I've ever seen. So what you do is basically you have a child come up and you arm wrestle them, and obviously, you'll probably win. But then something you could do is okay, all right, now I'm going to have 5 children come up, and they all put, however that works, to put their hands on yours, and they try to beat you. The point is you're relating, it takes a lot of strength to win an arm wrestle. You have to be strong to win an arm wrestle. Well, our verse today talks about how God is strong. He has the strength that he can give us so that we can follow him. And then so the verse is finally be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. So it's about strength. So if you want to use that, you can. It's just an idea. Again, you can come up with your own.
So 4 young men honored God. They made the hard choice, and we're going to go on to lesson 2. God gives wisdom to Daniel. This is, I think, a key component lesson to the whole series because it's showing us how this happened. We have Nebuchadnezzar. He has this dream. He doesn't know how to interpret. He wants the wise men to tell him 2 things: the dream and the interpretation. And the people are, the wise men are like, we cannot do this. That's the main point in the first part of the story. They cannot do it. It's beyond them. Daniel cannot do it. Daniel is brought in. He says specifically, I don't have this information. I don't have it within myself, but there is a God in heaven who reveals these mysteries. He has revealed your dream. God is the one. He was the only source in this situation and really in our life. You're like, well, he just interpreted a dream, and how many of us have these dreams that we need to be interpreted? I've had some weird ones in the last week. I'm not going to go there. But I wish they could be interpreted. That's not what this is talking about. The reality is the wisdom that God gives isn't just about dream interpretation. It's about how to live this life that we have. Only God has that wisdom. They don't have it on their own resources. Their friends do not have it. The people on the TV that they might see. You have to eliminate these other options. When you eliminate the wise men, they don't have them. They don't have the idea. They don't have the wisdom to be able to do this. All of these other options don't have that. God is the only one. And Daniel is rewarded. And the question that we're going to ask here is, where will the children at your Good News Club seek answers and direction? Where are they going to seek this wisdom? Because they have to make a hard choice. They have to live righteous lives. The life that God would have for them. How is it they're going to know how that happens? They're going to know how that happens by asking God for wisdom. It's kind of a full package deal. The first lesson gives you the problem. You have to live rightly. How are you going to do that? You're going to live each and every day seeking God's wisdom. You build from the first lesson into that second lesson, and you're trying to create this larger picture, a larger narrative for these kids.
I love this lesson especially, and I think that a really important thing to highlight is, like, look at Daniel and his friend's first response to this problem, and it's a big problem, right? Like, there's, like, the king is, like, going to kill them. Like, he issued a decree, all the wise men are going to die, and Daniel's like, all right, we got to find out the answer to this dream. So his first response, we might think, oh, he'll go to these books, he'll search up whatever, and he'll look for the answer. His first response is prayer. Like, that's his first, he goes to his friends, this is the situation, and they all pray together, and God gives them the answer. And so highlight that to the children when they're faced with a problem, and it doesn't have to be a big problem like being killed by the king. It can be a small problem. It can be any problem that they're faced with, whether that's a homework assignment or something hard happening at home. Their first response is prayer, because God is the one who has the wisdom they need to get through that situation. A Bible lesson intro, super simple, is like, what is the craziest dream you've ever had? If you remember a crazy dream you've had, tell that story. There's some pretty crazy dreams I've had.
You're going to hear some crazy stuff if you ask that question.
And so that's
And they want to tell you too.
It's,
They're going to be excited.
yeah.
And they'll be long, too.
So, pretty simple. You don't need too much for that. Just let them tell a crazy dream story. And so the object lesson for this one is really, really fun. So what you do, and this one's included in your kit. We haven't included all the object lessons, but there is a door prize on the table that has all the object lessons and the introduction ideas. So if you want to do this stuff, you can dig them, but some of them are good. This one is. So you have 4 pieces of paper, and only one of them says wisdom. What you do is I don't want to ball these up, but you're going to ball them all up. And then you give, actually I can ball them up. So you give them up to people, but first you choose a volunteer. So Micah, you be my volunteer. Okay, you look at the wall, and then, so Micah's my volunteer, he's the finder, he's looking for wisdom. And so you secretly give, this is the one that says wisdom, so you secretly give that to, you secretly give that to someone, and then And then the rest of them, you ball up and you can have.
Oh, this will be fun.
All right. So
This is cool.
now everyone, if even if you don't have paper, everyone ball up. So that's even harder now. So now, okay, Micah, you have one guess to guess who has. Oh, good try. But, so, and you can keep your papers or throw them away or whatever you want. So, you can make it easier for kids. I just did that because, anyway, so you can make it as hard or as easy as you want depending on how many kids you have. But the point is there's only one person who had the wisdom. And who was it? It was Yavin, right? He had the paper that said wisdom. Just like in life, there's only one person. There's only one place that you can go to that has wisdom. It might look like there are other people that have wisdom, but in reality, it's only from one person, and that's God. And so, kind of explaining that idea of one singular source of wisdom rather than multiple.
All right, the small group is, in your kit, you'll have these little pieces of paper. Okay, it just says God gives wisdom, since that's the word up for the day. What you want to do in your small group is have the kids either write, depending on their age, or draw a picture of a hard situation that they're facing. And then maybe you could even, depending on how old your group is, you could talk through what are some ways you can handle that situation. And maybe they would list some. But then ultimately you want to tell them that God is the one who can help them with that situation and encourage them to ask God who gives them the wisdom. And then they'll hear about that in the story. So simple, but just helping them think of that problem. Because then later on, in the Bible story, it'll talk about, how many of you have, like during the growth applications, it'll talk about a problem, and they'll already have that problem kind of thought about in there now. So.
And I wanted to mention a change you can make to that object lesson that I forgot to mention. You can only have the people who have the paper ball their hands, and everyone else doesn't. That would make it easier. So that's a change you can make. So verse introduction. This is a fun one. I need a volunteer. Someone from the back. How about Grant? You come up here. So look, I got. What is this? This is money, right? Look, Granite. I got some money for you.
You're rich.
Do you know how to make it rain?
Yes.
Okay, you make it rain for us. Make it rain.
Woo!
Yeah. If you have more money, you can.
Make it rain.
I know rain. Thank you, Granny. You can have these. So, if you want to find different, this is just what we have, but you can do whatever.
Monopoly
So
money.
yeah, Monopoly money would work really well. But so you make it rain and it looks really cool, and the kids are like, "Whoa, this is awesome!" But using money that way is not wise. Like if you have money, it's not wise to just throw it all around, right? That's not really a wise use of money. So is it wiser to just make it rain, or is it wiser to invest it? And so wisdom is something that's talked about in the verse. So
There's a piece on the
there's a
more money.
and it's $100.
So these young men are having to make a hard decision to live righteous lives in the midst of a population that is 100% geared towards idolatry, sexual immorality, and really just a whole different ideological set. They have to make a hard decision. How are they going to do that? We need to sell these kids on the idea of asking for wisdom each and every day, not living according to their own wisdom, to the wisdom of the world around them. And there's a promise that we get to share with these kids during the third lesson. The promise is with the statue that's built, there is a command. You must bow down, worship the statue. I remember this story being taught to me in Good News Club by Miss Arlene years and years ago, and the gospel was weaved throughout it, but what we really want to bring through, we're in a hard spot. We're seeking God for wisdom. Is God going to pull through? Is God going to deliver? The word up here is God delivers. And there is a serious consequence if they do not fall in line with everyone else. Again, huge peer pressure in another hostile environment. And in this situation, God chooses to show up himself, I think, through the person of Jesus, incarnate. But in our lives, God is not going to let you down. God will provide that wisdom. God will provide that direction. Sometimes it's difficult to perceive and difficult to understand, but God will provide. So the question we're going to ask here is, will the children at your Good News Club seek God as their deliverer? They have a hard situation, and they're going to need to seek God for wisdom. Will God provide it? These actions that God directs will deliver them. There's so many broken lives that are out there. You're like, well, if you start trying to find your satisfaction in some kind of chemical, right? You start with a smaller chemical, then a larger chemical, then a heavier chemical. I mean, by the time you get to a hard drug use that some of these kids they're going to encounter. I was offered drugs when I was in 5th grade, first time. Some of your kids might be sooner than that. Later on, as their life spans out, if we can get them to seek God each and every day, that wisdom that God provides to seek our satisfaction and pleasure in Him, rather than these chemical substances or whatever other options. There's tons of them out there. Empty substitutes. God will, it's right, it's true. We can seek Him and God's wisdom will provide.
Yeah, this is always one of my favorite stories growing up. I had one. Some of the movies were like when I was going. Do you guys ever watch VeggieTales? The VeggieTales version of it. It's all I can think about. It's kind of violent because they like go in the fire in that one. So anyway, just because worshiping the image was commanded by the king didn't make it right, and I think that's something kids kind of like struggle to like understand. Like, just because someone in authority says something doesn't make it objectively right or objectively true. Does that make sense? Like, the king was telling them to bow down to an idol, something that God tells us not to do. And God is the ultimate authority. God is the final say, the final authority. And so, even though this king was, in the place of authority, what he was saying didn't make it objectively right or objectively true. And so that's, obeying God is greater than obeying man. You could even read that verse. We must obey God rather than men. That Peter says to the Sanhedrin or something. Okay, guys, this is a really, really fun Bible lesson. I'll go through it fast. So I need 2 volunteers. So Gavin and Micah. I swear, I'm going to use Micah every time. All right, Gavin, you're going to be the VIP, and you're going to be the bodyguard. All right, and so how it works, you pick 2 volunteers really quick. They come up. You make one the VIP and make one the bodyguard. Then you have all the other children. You give them paper balls, and they're included in your thing. And so you guys, you make a circle around them. And then, Micah, your job is to deliver the VIP from this paper ball. I'm going to stand back here so it's not so easy. Right? And so then they get in a circle, and then they try to hit him. Yeah, and if you hit him, that's okay. So it's just, you don't have to, if you have like 40 kids, it's going to take a long time for them to circle up and get, but so you might want to choose maybe 3 or 4 kids to come up and be the throwers, and then, does that make sense? Like, if you have so many kids, it might take a while to set up, but hopefully. And again, just an idea. You don't have to. I think it's a cool idea.
What's the link there?
The link, I included a link. So the VIP was in trouble, and the bodyguard was trying to keep him safe. In the Bible, it talks about some men who were in trouble, but they trusted God, that God would deliver them. So the job of the bodyguard is to deliver or to save the VIP from trouble, and that's what God did for these men. All right, object lesson. Some of you have already seen this before, but you have half a sheet of paper, like this. You have half a sheet of paper, and you fold it in half. And there's a YouTube link if you scan the thing. So you fold it in half like this. All right? And then once it's folded in half, and I've already started it, you start cutting it. All right, so you cut it in half. You make one cut like that, and another cut like that. And you keep going like this. I'll show you. So, cut like that. Flip it around. Cut like that. You flip it around, cut like that. Until it looks like this. Okay, and you can watch this video again. Then, the end result will be not this thing.
You don't cut the ends, yeah.
You also have to cut the ends off too. So
You don't cut the ends.
yeah, you don't cut the ends, but you do have to cut this part. See this part? See that part of the, of the paper? I'll show you. So, but don't cut the ends, because if you cut the ends, it's not going to work. Because then it'll break. So then you cut it like that. So it'll open up like a little circle like that. See? Yeah, that's a circle, and then you can set it over your head.
You have to challenge them to.
Woo! And then
You have to challenge them to put their hand through the piece of paper.
or the hand, and even you could use it with a bigger piece of paper. And put your whole. You could use it with a whole sheet of paper, and then put your whole body through if you want, like that, and then it's more impressive. Wow. But the point is that God is God of the impossible. God delivered these men from the fire, from being killed by the flames. And God is all-powerful. He is the deliverer. And so what you want to do is ask them, do you guys think that I can fit my head through this piece of paper? Do you guys think I can fit my body through this piece of paper? No, I don't think you can. Well, you didn't trust that I could, and so you show them how to do it. And then now they see, oh, you could do it the whole time. So, again, watch the video so you know how to do it.
The small group is just a simple little thing. So there's going to be a piece of paper, and it'll have these two circles on it, so the kids can cut it out. You have scissors in your kit, or you can cut them out, however you want to do that. And then there's Brad, so they just stick one through. They color the papers, and they stick one through, and it's the little Nebuchadnezzar or the Fire Furnace story on the little thing.
It's kind of fun. I like that.
I love that. All right. I need a volunteer. Pierce. All right. I have this jar that I just can't seem to, can't. Are you strong enough to open this jar? Can you please open this jar? You'll need that skill when you. Did you open it? Open it. Yay! High five. All right, and then you open the jar. And so we have this jar kind of, I don't know if you guys like, have you guys ever not been able to open a jar and then you're like, you have to use a towel and you have to like put gloves on you? I don't know. But like the point is, you gotta be strong to open a jar. You gotta have strength to open a jar. And it talks about strength and remembers how God gives us strength and how we can be strong in Him. He's the source of strength. But I think this is a cool.
I mean, I've never had that problem, but we just actually had 2 jars today. That my daughter Chloe, she's 11, and these little kids with jars, they're going to be able to identify with this. A jar that's tight like that is not going to be something that they're able to open. And so you can talk about the strength that's needed there and God's strength. Lesson 3, we've got young men needing to make a tough decision to live right lives in the midst of a wicked world. They're seeking God's wisdom each and every day. God will deliver them. And lesson 4 is about God confronting the sin of Belshazzar. And this is increasing the idea that God's holy. He's different than the world that's around them, and there are consequences to sin. There's a consequence to not seeking His wisdom. There's a consequence to seeking your own wisdom and living by your own wisdom. We have Belshazzar. He is partying it up. He decides to use cups that he knows he should not use. This is something the people of Israel were a known quantity in the kingdom. People knew about Daniel. He was one of the top 3 advisors in the entire kingdom. I mean, people knew about where he came from. They knew about his God. Nebuchadnezzar had lived 7 years as a crazy individual. That he didn't have sense, the Bible says. And it was the God of Israel that he declared, this is the God. He is the Most High. It's not like this was an unknown quantity. But he decides he wants to use these cups, and he knows it's wrong. And so God, he writes a message on the wall. He wants to know what the message means. He's freaked out. Here's someplace you want to really build that up, because in the text, You have him shaking. It describes him in the text as being really worried, really concerned about this. This is something that it's an unknown thing for him. He thinks he's pretty high and mighty. He's living in partying here, and now something's happened, and he doesn't know how to interpret it. Well, they bring in Daniel. Daniel's the one who is able to do this, but he says, "You've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting. You're going to be judged." He's still given his rewards, but the growth application, is to say, sin is a serious thing. We're not winking. God does not wink at sin, and He forgives sin. And sometimes we think the price that Christ paid on the cross, that's great, so that means I can do whatever I want. No, it does not. Sin is serious, and it's going to affect your life. It's going to affect the lives around you. And ultimately, even as a believer, there are areas in your life that you can become a slave to sin, and you would need to have freedom again. You can have forgiveness, but do not get caught up in that. Main challenge here, will the children at your Good News Club see the seriousness of sin? Because at the first lesson, remember, they had the choice to do that. They sought God's wisdom instead. God delivered them, and we want to reinforce that idea that if they had not done that, their lives would have been radically different. And there is a seriousness of sin. There are sinful choices. There are always serious consequences. And we want to paint that for these kids. They're making decisions, even at the age that they're making. This is a big deal.
It's really important in this lesson that you help the children think through what King Belshazzar was doing wrong. Because on the surface, from an outsider's perspective, he's just drinking from some cups, right, and partying. But it's more than that. I was reading some commentaries, and basically what King Belshazzar was doing was he was taunting God. He was laughing at God and mocking, taunting Him, saying, "Come and get me because you can't, because I'm the best." Almost. And so he knew, it's not like Belshazzar was like, "Hey, I found these random cups. Let's drink from." No, he knew that this was disrespectful, and so we have to kind of help these children think through. Okay, this is where Belshazzar was being prideful, but we're prideful today. We're just like him. We also are prideful in when we brag, when we make fun of others, when we choose to not listen to our parents or our teachers, when we always want to be the best at something and we're not, we get upset, right? All these examples, and children will relate. And you can think of more examples. There's more examples. But those are examples of serious pride. Here's the Bible lesson intro. This is kind of a fun one. So on the PowerPoint, it's going to look like this, and you've got the key code. This is the key code right here to the figuring this out. But if you're not using PowerPoint, you have this in your kit, and you have this sheet of paper. You show, guys, look, I have this secret message. And then you give key codes to each small group, or to split them up into some groups, and then they race to find out what this key code could be. And then when they find out, they're like, "Oh!" I'm not going to tell you because that would spoil it. It's a secret code. There's a reason for it. Secret code. Okay, object lesson.
Jesus loves me. Go ahead.
So for this object lesson, it's called serious sin. Sin is a very, very serious thing. It ruins things, right? It's wicked. It's evil. And so you have this nice, clear jar or glass of water. You could even fresh, right? Or you could have a child come up and drink the water just to kind of help them see it's clean, it's fresh. But then, if you want, you can use salt. I prefer salt because you can't actually see salt, and there's a teaching point there. So you put the salt in the water, and we all know what happens when you put salt in water. This is not going to be a surprise to us, right? So you mix it up, and now it's salty water. How many of you guys like to drink salty water? Warm, lukewarm, salty ocean water. No, you don't like to drink that. It's not crisp. And so it was good before, but when we choose to sin, it ruins our lives. You can't see it. You might not think, "Oh, well, I sinned, but that's not messing up my life. That's not a serious thing." You might not think it is. Sin in reality, in the truth of the matter, It is a very serious thing. This water is no longer drinkable. If I drank too much of the salt water, I would die. That's a serious thing. And so, you might not, children might not think their sin is a big deal, but it is. And so this, using salt, I think will help them to kind of come to terms with that, maybe. But the point is, sin is a very serious thing.
All right, this is my random small group. I think it's going to be fun. So the idea of this lesson, I taught this lesson at the Christian school after teaching it in 2018. And it was like, I loved it so much. Like, it's my dad's favorite story, so maybe that's why. But when the guy says, even though you knew all this, you knew everything that happened to his dad and you still... Anyway, it's such a good story. But for the lesson, you're kind of wrestling with this idea that God loves people, but God is just. And the word up is God is just. And so in your small group, if you're leading a small group, you're going to have to think through this a little bit yourself of how to explain the difference between God's love and his justice. But on this thing, right, we're going to try to explain to them how there's justice in the world, right? If you steal a bike, so they have to try to match up, you do a shooting, you're going to go to jail, right? That's the consequence that you deserve for that. That's justice, okay? If you speed, you're going to get a ticket. That's justice, okay? God is just. If you steal a bike, you might have to pay money to replace it, okay? So God is just. God is also loving. So if you lie, cheat, and steal, God still loves you. If you disobey God, right? So they have the little pictures. He died for you. So you're trying to help them to kind of see the difference. But how would we like to live in a world if someone like King Belshazzar was the king who wasn't just? People could just do whatever they wanted. And so it's God's love and his justice. Sometimes I tell the kids, God's love is over here, God's justice is over here, and they work together. And that's how we know we can trust God, because he is just, but he's also loving. And so there's a balance. So it's just kind of a fun thing to maybe help them think it through.
All right, so for the, there's a non-PowerPoint version for this. But for the verse introduction, we have a story, so you have to figure out what's missing. Joe got a speeding ticket. The judge gave him a fine of $500. And then you don't say that. And then the judge let Joe go. Now, would it be just for the judge to let Joe go and him not what's missing, right? Someone had to have paid the fine. Someone had to pay the fine, and that's what justice is. You're trying to help them come to terms with justice is what's right. And so there was a fine. There had to be $500 paid. That was the fine. That was the price. And so in his grace, someone paid for Joe to not have to pay that. And that's the same thing for Jesus. Jesus in his grace paid the price for our sin. And he promises to cleanse us and forgive us of our sin and from all unrighteousness. And so that's 1 John 1:9.
So we got a group of young men who need to make the hard choice to live a righteous life in the midst of a wicked nation. They are seeking God's wisdom. God delivers them, because the reality is sin would be the worst consequence. It's compared to life they could have lived, the consequences of sin in their life would have eaten them and torn them apart. It would have been better for them to have been burned up in the fiery furnace than to live this life of sin and be eternally separated from God and to embrace that ideology. Does that make sense? So sin is serious to God. The last one in the series here, the last lesson that we get to teach is God rescues Daniel in the lion's den. This talks about God being faithful, or God's faithfulness to us. God is the rescue, but ultimately it's talking about Daniel and his life of faithfulness and how God honors that faithfulness. That is what God is looking for. This is Daniel now later on in life. We get kind of the whole picture of Daniel's life. Up front, he was a young kid in a different land. Now he is a man who has been serving the Lord faithfully, day after day, year after year. There's people that are upset with him because they're jealous of him. So they make a law. We know this story. The consequence for praying to anyone other than Darius was to be thrown into the lion's den, and he's thrown into the lion's den. He goes back and prays 3 times a day, just like he always had done, because he was going to be faithful to God. He wasn't harming the king. He wasn't doing anything against the kingdom. There was no treason involved here. He was going to remain faithful, even though there was yet again another negative consequence. And this is a man who was following with God Day by day. Could we convince these kids to live day by day, making decisions, not we want to live a trajectory towards God as well, but the trajectory is lived in the moment, in the now. We need to convince these kids that's our heart, day by day, being faithful. And God rewards that faithfulness in Daniel's life physically. He will reward that faithfulness in each and every life who is faithful to him. God will remain faithful. And so we have this question: will children at your Good News Club understand faithfulness to God? Will they be able to make that choice by seeking God's wisdom, seeking God's deliverance? Because the reality of a sinful choice, the reality of the sinful the destruction that comes from sin, and the result, the payoff really is a life of faithfulness to God. God will remain faithful to them. It's a huge, awesome lesson series. And go ahead and unpack this with a point to ponder there.
Yeah, God shows incredible faithfulness to Daniel, but I think it's easy also to miss how faithful Daniel is to God. I mean, they're both faithful to each other, kind of. God is faithful to Daniel, but Daniel is also showing faithfulness to God. And so I love at the beginning how it explains, like in the Bible it says he had an excellent spirit. He was distinguished. Like that kind of sets him apart from these other. Like I was looking at some other, like I was watching some YouTube videos, and some people think that some of the political leaders that Daniel was working with were like corrupt and were only in it for like the money and the riches and the stuff that they could get from it. But Daniel, that's not what he was there. He was actually doing his job, right? He was doing his job well, and there was no error or fault found within him. Like these guys tried to find anything that they could pin against him. They couldn't find anything. How convicting is that, right? Like Daniel, every area of Daniel's life was faithful to God. They couldn't find a thing. There was no error or fault within him, and so that's really cool. So we got the Bible lesson intro idea. So for this one, you're gonna play Kingdom Control instead of Volume Control. It's Kingdom Control. So there's a famous memory verse game called Volume Control. So you're gonna pick a volunteer to be in charge. Okay, that's your go-to phrase. You are in charge. You're in charge. So Micah, you come be in charge. Okay. So Micah, he's gonna play volume control. So the way you play volume control. Okay, if you put your hand up here, we say it loud. If you put it here, we say it quiet. If you put it here, we say it in the middle. Okay, and then you play the game and they do. Thank you, Micah. But Micah is the one in charge. Okay, and that's the key here. And then you link to it like Micah. He was in charge of all you guys as we were playing the game. In our lesson today, we're going to learn about how Daniel was in charge of hundreds of thousands of people he was placed in charge of.
A third of the kingdom, yeah.
Over the kingdom. Okay, object lesson. We've got our faithfulness and God's faithfulness. So, you'll hold up a pencil. This is a red pencil. And it's going to, red is also always bad. So, red is demonstrating.
Dark?
Red is demonstrating when you try to live. Okay, I'm gonna stop saying red. This pencil is demonstrating when we try to live our lives apart from God's faithfulness. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna break the pencil. It's easy to break one pencil, right? How easy is it to break? You could probably have a kid come up and break the pencil. Now, if you're gonna do that, be careful, because then the kid might not be able to, and then that's the whole purpose. So probably a better idea is for you to break the pencil. So then you break the pencil and then you hold up. All right, let's try again. This pencil represents when we choose to depend on God in prayer. And when we have a problem, we pray, we depend on Him. And so God gives us the peace, the strength, the love, and the wisdom we need to make it through. So you rubber band them all together and you try to break them. You can't, because you can't break 5 pencils. So the idea is that when you try to live life on your own, without God and without depending on Him, it doesn't work too well. But with God and His faithfulness, He can predict.
All right,
I like this.
This is the best one.
This is the best
you guys
one.
excited?
We literally saved the best one.
So this is, we are going to help the kids understand prayer, right? Because Daniel's going to pray. We haven't talked a lot about prayer this year, but it's so important, right? We're teaching them how to spend time with God in the beginning. We want to teach them what it is to pray. So you're gonna have these emojis, and in your small group, you'll you can do it two ways. You can give them these sheets first, or you can show them these, however you want to do it. But on the sheets, if you give them the sheets first, on this side, have them fold it in half, and on this side, it says each little emoji and then what it means as far as prayer. So like the smiley face, praise God for the beautiful world He made. Okay, pray for someone who is sick and ask God to help them feel better. Thank God for your family. Pray for someone you know who is sad, or you could also say something that makes you sad. So like asking God for help in a difficult situation. Thank God for giving you a friend who makes you laugh. Ask God to help you forgive those who make you angry. And thank God for giving me whatever. Okay? So you have those, so you can show them kind of the different little things. And then in your group, you'll want to take turns if you have, I don't know how big your groups are, but you would give each one of the kids these. You want to start with the thank you ones, right? We always want to start our prayer with praise. So give some the thank you ones, and they have to, so on the back it says, thank you, God, for blank friend. Okay, so they have to think of their friend. I thank God for whatever. I'm sad about blank, please help me. Okay, so then you're going to, basically, you would say, okay, let's pray, dear God. And they're going to hold these papers in their hands and fill in on the cards. They're kind of getting familiar with that prayer. Do that a couple times. And then, while they're eating their snack, they can go through and fill out their prayer. So they can put in something they're thankful for, someone that they know who's struggling, and then you would encourage them to take this home, and when they do their devotion book, pray through their emotions. And also help them, like, when you're feeling happy, you can do this. When you're feeling sick, you can do this. So also teaching them that our emotions can trigger us to pray. Daniel could have just been outraged. He could have been angry, but his emotional response was always to go to God in prayer. So, fun little thing. And they like emojis, so it'll be fun.
All right. So for the verse introduction, you hold up two animals. What animal is this? Wow. Okay, what is this? A crocodile, right? All right, your job is to guess which one of these animals have the strongest bite force. If you think the lion has the strongest bite force, put your hand on your head. If you think the alligator has the strongest bite force, give me a thumbs up. Wow, everyone already did their research. Yes, you're right. The crocodile has a bite force of 3,700 psi. So, it's very strong. The lion only has like 1,000. But then, so you explain like, yeah, the alligator is the strongest, or I think the shark is the strongest. But, you know, these are really strong. God gave these animals their strength, and God can also give you strength as well. And that's what it talks about in our verse, how God gives us strength. Finally, be strong in the Lord in this strength. I like it, guys. I think that's a fun one.
I think
that.
they'll get into that.
I love that one.
I'll get into that. So we got the last lesson here. This is where you just go over the review. There to make encouraging them to make the hard choice by seeking God's wisdom, allowing them to see what that deliverance is really like, because sin is destructive. It's always serious. There's always serious consequences, and the payoff that they're going to have at the end of the day is a life of faithfulness to God, and God is faithful to them. That's the best life to live. We have 6 weeks to sell that idea to these kids. And each and every week that they come back, we want to make these times to be really powerful and impacting as much as we can. And we can't sell this on our own. This is not something that you can do in your own strength. It's something that only the Holy Spirit's going to be able to do in and through their life. That's the overview lesson. I wanted to... you might have a couple more things there. This lady here, the opportunity, all these different things that they are encountering. Unless you've been in this situation, and I think in various parts of our lives we have been, in a situation where everyone around us is trying to get us to do something, whatever it is. And if there's a unified front around us, it is so hard. It is so hard to stand up. We have an opportunity to help these kids see that even in the midst of that, even in that situation, there's a hard choice. The choice to do what is right is always hard. To honor God is always going to be the hard choice. How are we going to do that? We're going to seek His wisdom. Each and every day, there's going to be pressure that's applied. God can deliver you from that pressure. He will deliver. The motive, why? Because sin is destructive. Payoff is a life of faithfulness to God. I'm so thankful for my life with the Lord. And you should be thankful, right? Hopefully, as you're living and growing in your own walk, you're trying to sell that walk to them. You are selling what you have found in your life to be true to them. Sell it in a genuine way. That's our opportunity. I think it's a really neat lesson series. It's Brandon, this is one of his favorites. He said, it is a really neat opportunity. 6 weeks, and the Spirit is with you to sell it. Go ahead.
So there's just a few points to ponder, but I think thinking about Daniel as a whole, I kept coming back to the fact that like these 4 guys recognized like the reality of who God was. Like God to them wasn't just like a fairy tale or like a figment. God was real. Like they were in this hostile situation, and what they knew about God and how much they honored and respected him played out in their lives. Like they lived it. They lived it out. And so, like that's something that we need to explain to the children. Like God is real, and because he's real, and he's God, and he's the authority, how then should we live? How are we going to respond? How should we respond to that? Exactly like Daniel and his friends did, right? Because they lived that out. And so, kind of explaining that to them. So there's a suggested schedule for your review week, their party game and small groups time and the opening. And then I want to go to the Valentine. So if you flip the page, there's one last thing, and I'll just go over this real quick. So the review game is a puzzle of love. Puzzle of love. So you have 8 hearts that are cut in 2 pieces. So each heart, so there's 16 pieces total, but it's a puzzle of 2. So when a child answers a question, you have them come up, and they have to guess 2 pieces and try to put them together. And is it in there? It's in there. And so if they put them together, they get 1,000 points. Can you believe the book only suggested to give them 100 points if they got it right? I was like, no. So they come up and they say, I'm going to pick this one, and it looks like I got it exactly wrong. So they try to get it together. It's actually a really fun idea. I think it's cool. So then the party games, you've got mittens and kisses. Mittens and kisses. It's a relay race. So you split them up into 2 teams, line them up, and so you take 2 piles of kisses and you set them on the floor, and you give them mittens or gloves. You give gloves to the first person in line, and they have to run down, try to unwrap a kiss, put it in their mouth, eat it, and run back, and they give their gloves to the next person in line. And if you don't know, it's really hard to unwrap kisses when you have mittens on. So it's kind of fun to watch them. The next one is just really simple. It's called musical hearts. There's paper hearts, enough for 1 per child. So you count out the number of children that you have, -1 since it's musical hearts. Set them in a circle, play some music. They walk around the hearts. When the music stops, they sit down on a heart. Whoever doesn't have a heart is out. Or if your kids can't handle being out, they can sit in the middle. And I don't know. I prefer them to be out. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's the games or suggested schedule for you in there. But I love this story of Daniel, guys. This is a great series, so I'm excited for it.